Welcome, any and all, to the Movie Club Collective podcast. This week, we'll be doing our first documentary. Let me introduce everybody real quick. I'm your host, John Olson. With me here in a new studio, but it's the old studio. You can see Jose back there.
Waving at you because I have
Yeah.
two cameras on me.
Yeah, so you know Jose. He's always here. He's a person. And with us for the first time, we have Ben Myers. He is director and producer of Valiant. Was it? Is that right?
The Vanity.
The Vanity. Yeah. Oh my God. That's what. It would help if I wrote things down, right? Director and producer of The Vanity. An upcoming short. If they want to learn more about it, they can find you on Twitter. We can throw that up right now.
Yeah. Shakedown Productions. All the information. Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff.
Just like at Shakedown Productions.
Yep. At Shakedown Productions.
Cool. We'll throw that up on the screen, and then we'll throw it out. We usually do it at the end, but I want to just throw it up front. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So we instituted a new format last week, in which we will collectively score the film out of 100. This week we have a missing person, so we're trying a new way of getting to 100 with 3 people. So we're gonna rate the film over 5 categories. We'll each have 5 points to give, and then we'll have a section of averaged out scores that will fill in the remaining 25 points. So, since this is a documentary, we have a new set of categories. And actually, on a side note, we're probably going to change the narrative categories from last time. So, the categories we'll be going over. So, we'll be judging the film on how informative it was. Was it coherent? How much coherence does the film have? How is the footage? Like, did they capture kind of the best stuff that they could get, or just like really impressive footage? We'll talk about the artistry of the film and sort of art versus nonfiction versus sort of the artistry involved in that. And then we'll talk about the film's relevance, and we'll grade on kind of how impactful it is and how relevant its topic matter is. So without further ado, let's get into it. So our first category is informative. And once again, we're rating this kind of out of... before we get into it, I did this last week. I forgot to intro the film properly. So this week we'll be doing The Act of Killing.
Damn.
Yeah.
Documentary.
Hold on.
It was intense. I just watched it for the first time about an hour before this session. It's intense.
Yeah, the director's name. Okay, here we go. It's by Joshua Oppenheimer and Anonymous.
Oppenheimer.
So you don't often get Anonymous on the directing credits for a film.
There were actually a shit ton of anonymous credits. There were like 50 plus anonymous credits.
Yeah, it's like almost half the crew.
Apparently, because they don't want to be killed by the people that were in the film.
So that right there tells you something. Okay, so let's talk about how informative this film was. Did you guys walk away with something? Like, what did you learn? What did you learn from the film, factually? I
mean, for me, I'm gonna go with a 2 on this guy.
Oh, you got note cards.
Yeah, just for this one.
Okay.
Because you have a 2 written in that way.
Yeah, I got some more. But, I gave it a 2 because right away, I just really wasn't aware of this part of Indonesia's history personally. Mm-hmm. It wasn't sort of on my cultural and historical radar. So right away, there was kind of a new bit of information. But I will say, if you don't know much about it, they do a pretty good job of giving you the context that you need, but I really had a big thirst for wanting to know more details about it. So I gave it a 2 because I didn't feel like you were really better off knowing more about the subject matter and then getting into the deep psyche of journey of this guy. I didn't feel like they gave a lot of details throughout in terms of like, oh, I know this like a textbook now. I don't think that was what the film was about. So this is the lowest score I gave, per category in this film. But I'd give it a 2 because I didn't really think they were focusing on factually informing you with dates and circumstances.
Yeah, they gave you like the years that it happened, and then the rest of it you just kind of had to get through context clues.
Yeah, I don't think that's a downside necessarily of the film, but I will say if
I
you
think
wanted
we'll come back around to that topic when we get to artistry.
Yeah.
Sure. What about you, Jose?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna go with a 3, and your opinion was like actually like really impactful to these because I did not have too much of a grasp of how to measure this film by information, like what this film should inform me of. But I do believe that the information that it's giving paints at, even when it paints a face of Indonesia, I don't think it's accurate because I'm walking out of that film thinking like this is freaking North Korea. Like these people are like, you're talking about a government who's condoning this. You're talking about like, and you're showing paramilitary organizations, and they're clearly supported by everybody. But you're also showing every background was grouchy, was like dirty. And I come from countries where this can happen, but you have to a government building and then there's mold on the ceiling. So clearly they're showing either that the entire country is that level of poor, or they're just showing you an aspect of that country. Because I'd never had any idea that Indonesia was going to be like this. So now I'm walking with a perspective of Indonesia that I don't think is true.
I think
we lost Ben.
All right, now talk your trash.
Yeah, I was saying poor Indonesia, man. I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know if you're.
Okay. I have a response to that. It's that you're viewing a bubble within Indonesia. You're looking at a very specific group and following them around. Like, you're not seeing the daily lives of the other regular people.
Actually, I'm contrary to that. I think we did get to see a lot of what may be going on around there because you saw a lot of masses of people, and they were kind of at a certain level there. That were in some rough times. I mean, those people were not well off, but they did occasionally
They're in survival mode. They
occasionally showed some really commercial areas of Indonesia, some very metropolitan areas, and I think that even though they didn't show a lot of it, what it made me realize is that there's probably a lot of inequality there, as would come from an authoritarian system. But yeah, I felt bad it made me think a lot about what's going on in that country.
Well, some of the gangsters, like, they're not equal. What's his name? Anwar Congo? He lives in like a mansion, but his companion, what was his name?
The henchman.
Yeah.
This is actually henchman. This is a real life henchman. The guy around him.
Yeah, the guy who's friends with Anwar lived in like kind of a slum.
The one they kept referring to as his neighbor, right?
Yeah.
That guy that told the story about
no, the guy who's wearing the dresses the whole time. The big guy. Who's
that
guy. Who ran for parliament.
It's amazing. It's like he's like this great sidekick. He's always in these different costumes and outfits. I thought it was at first I was like, I can't believe this. Like, this is so unbelievable. There's so much verisimilitude in this film. It's almost unbelievable. Crazy. But then I thought, you know what? They're framing this whole thing about the psychology of sadism and how you can buy into that. And I think the idea of like pretending you're someone else, pretending the scenario is someone else, like this guy's always in different outfits, different uniforms, playing different roles, literally and figuratively. So I guess it wasn't too much of a stretch for him to be like admiring how beautiful these ladies look on this, walking into this giant fish. It was just seen from the opening while he's dressed and dragged, completely serious.
Yes.
So before we move on, because I do want to kind of get to the next category, I guess I'm a little torn on it because I feel like we did learn a lot about like the current state of Indonesia, of the Indonesian government, like how it's essentially run by paramilitary and like it's very corrupt. So on that, like, I feel like it does shed a lot of light on the current state, and you get it through this wacky perspective, but you still see like the cronyism. You see people falling in line just because like they're scared to be around these murderers who've killed thousands of people. So I don't know. So I think a 2 is a little low in that regard.
I feel like on that, I'm going to still stand by my deuce on this particular category because I feel like if there was a Vice doc version of this, you might get the same situation, but just
You
a
get
little bit
tons
more
of
factual
information, yeah.
Yeah, you would have gotten that info dump, and that's where I stand.
That's
but
fair. I'm gonna give it a 3. Jose, you sticking with your 3?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So we got 2 3s and a 2. So I guess what would you say? We'll give that a 3 to the ghost category. So going on, what's that?
I say it's interesting because
if the 2s outweigh the 3s, we'll give it a 2. I think that's
No. What I'm saying is that I have mixed feelings about this because I do come from a country that is deteriorating to the point in which the perspective that people have from my country is completely
for the
different.
viewers. You wanna
From the viewers,
say what?
yes,
country?
and I feel Venezuela. I come from Venezuela, and a part of me is still convinced that I'm watching this movie and I go, this can be a clear representation of a country. And then I'm remembering my own country and going like, no, this actually could be a clear representation of this country. They might not have need to make any amends because this is actually how people live. Because this is happening where I come from. This is
and I think the anonymous names on the credits say a lot about that.
Yeah.
Just the
feel
fact
like
that people
It made me
were-
think about the people. Just as a quick note, it made me think about the people that were not anonymous. For example, they had PAs on their list of PAs. First 8 were anonymous, and then they had 3 or 4. I'm like, were those people that said, "Hey, I don't have a problem"?
Well, I think
or they
most
not
of them
all
were the
with-
European crew that were not
Right,
anonymous.
Probably.
So,
Yeah.
they're safe from repercussion from Indonesian government because their reach isn't that far. So, what about coherence? Was this a coherent story? Jose, why don't you kick us off? How do you go? How are you rating it?
Well, I'm gonna give it incoherence. I'm gonna give it a 4. I'm gonna go for. I understand what they're saying, but I still feel that there was so much information left behind. And granted, you can probably provide all that information, and the objective of this thing was for them to recreate. It wasn't a documentary about the killings. It was a documentary about they making these people recreate what they did, and then what would happen if you expose this person, because that's the whole psychology. What would happen if I expose this person to some sort of way for them to understand, because I can't just sit down and talk to them and tell them what you did is wrong, because they have been programmed already to not acknowledge that. So I think that it's pretty close to coherence, because that is what we saw. That is exactly what we saw. We saw them saying, put a costume, play the character, and then they got the emotional response they wanted. But still, it does feel that there was still an aspect that was missing, and was maybe somebody around, some sort of authoritarian figure within human psyche to say, this is what's happening to this person. This is what this, like an explanation of this sociopathy, like this is possible in this sense or in that sense. I feel I missed the informed opinion.
There's definitely some crossover in these categories. And I think that this, what you take away from it, is both informative and kind of informs how coherent the film is. And I think it does jump around a bit, especially in the beginning. Once you start to know the characters and you understand that it's about the repercussions of, genocide and what the aftermath of that looks like, I think it gets more coherent as the film goes on. I give it another 3 on this one. I think I've seen documentaries that have a much more specific story, and this one is, I think part of it's just the nature of making documentaries. Sometimes you're going to get a very clear story from the get-go, and sometimes you're looking. And I felt that search early on in the film, they were kind of grasping for what the film would be about, and then in the second half it really comes in.
I think that's evident even in Josh's process. The filmmaker started making a film about some of the families of people that had died, and then he's changed the focus of the documentary to focus on these killers. I went ahead and gave the film a 4 for coherence.
You guys outweigh me.
Yeah, and I kind of went back and forth on this, but I feel like if you take the conceit of the film is one that you're trying to go through an emotional, psychological journey, and that those are the nature of your themes. So I think that there is going to be something missing in terms of if you want to judge it on coherence. I could totally see how having a talking head come in might have sewn things through and give some perspective and not left things so neat and clean and kind of created maybe a more of a through line to really know and how to ask these questions. That being said, I really felt like they did a great job of providing context for what this means in such a foreign, not even just the fact that it's in the country, but this authoritarian culture is so foreign to our mindset. They did a really good job of explaining how do you understand what it's like to be in that world so that you can understand the story that's going to happen here. And a specific example from the film I think they did a good job with in terms of time and such like that. There was a scene earlier on in the film where Anwar was drinking and his hair was dyed. And I was watching the scene for a second. It was at night and they were all singing around with the guitar player. And I was like, oh, his hair's dyed. I guess he must have done that to look younger, right? And then the next scene, he's not dyed his hair yet. And then shortly after, not within 10 minutes of that time in the film, so it's fresh as a viewer in my memory, they show a scene where he talks about, he's watching himself and he thinks, I should dye my hair. My costume isn't right, you know? So in this artifice of him trying to make this film, he takes one step closer. So they do kind of explain little things like that in the film.
Well, I caught a case of the opposite. I caught a case of the opposite with the hair, where after he dyed it, there was a scene of him in the car where he had the white hair, and then it went back to the black hair.
Yeah.
I feel like that's sort of true. Like, that makes us aware of the editing and that they're
jumping in time.
They're jumping back and forth in time. And to
You
me
think it's
that's
linear.
to me that's a ding against the coherence of the film, is that it's not invisible. I feel like invisible filmmaking is kind of, what we aspire to.
Why
the audience doesn't notice.
It's because it brings awareness that you are building the chronological time of the story to serve a purpose, opposite to just following the events in the way that they happen.
Do you see that as a good thing?
I don't see that as a good thing.
See, I think what you John see as a negative, I do see it kind of stuck out to me. It is a bit of a sore thumb, but I gave them credit for the way that they handled it, because I think that they, by creating the sense of out of time, I think it works to the filmmaker's favor, because we're kind of entering a timeless space of this gentleman's psyche. And especially, the fact that we go back to the scene the gangster scene that they shot, where they're recreating this interrogation scene. That's the most sort of cinematic scenarios that happen in there. And we jump back and forth for a time. We go to it when it's emotionally convenient in the film, not necessarily the order of telling things that happen. We go to scenes when they're emotionally relevant in the emotional journey of the scene. So I feel like that is the kind of film that Joshua was trying to create there. That's the sense that I got from it. And I felt like I noticed it, the black hair, and then we went back. But I started to realize that he was getting us used to the fact that maybe we're going to move around or we're going to show things when they matter.
I can kind of buy that argument. Another thing, though, is like there was a lot of stuff they were doing in the movie that I had no context for. Like, I didn't understand why they were doing it. So, for example, when they have like the scarred makeup on and then they're interrogating, like, they don't show us them writing these scenes. They don't show us, like, we don't get the direction for why. Like, we don't, like, they never give us that, if Congo is directing these, like, we don't see him directing it. And so we don't know what that means. Like, the face scar, like, I was expecting a scene where they were going to get scarred or something, and instead it's always just them hanging around in this, like, really extreme makeup. And I just wanted a little extra context. And I feel like the film, I guess this kind of, I feel like what you're saying is more artistry, and you're fighting for the artistry of the film. And
I was a big fan of it.
And I'm kind of talking about, yeah.
I do agree with you on that, though. I mean, I think that definitely in those specific examples, because it added to the idea of, like, this is just bizarre. Like, this is a bizarre thing, and they don't explain it, so you don't have any context to it. So you're constantly thinking about how weird this is. So I will agree that when it comes to coherence, I definitely could cede your point on that for sure.
Yeah. All right. So, are you coming down to 3? Are you coming down to 3 with me? Or are you sticking with your 4?
You know what? I'm gonna go with a 3 because
All right.
I'm thinking about the general viewer out there, and or someone just digesting a documentary for the first time and not aware of the spectrum of stuff. And yeah, I can see why a lot of audience members might find aspects of this confusing, in that sense. But I did enjoy what they were trying to do with it.
That's fair. And I think I agree with you, and I'll probably give it more points for artistry. But before artistry, we have footage. So this category is kind of talking about, how good were the moments that they managed to capture on film? How powerful were they? Did they resonate with you?
Mm-hmm.
You want to take us away, Ben?
Yeah, I was really torn on that one. I'm going to make up my mind after this conversation. I'm going to go with a 4 or 5. And my reason for that is, when you guys introduced this category,
4.5?
A 4 or a 5. I mean,
Okay,
I don't know.
You're deciding.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to see what
Still
you guys
the
fellas have to say, because here's what I'll say about this. There are very few documentaries that occasionally you get to watch and you just feel like you're watching a cinematic film unfold before your eyes, because of the perspective, because of the subject matter, because they're lifting something out of the subject matter more than what's going on. And this was definitely one of those films. So to that end, it gets huge points. That being said, that's true of the whole scenario and what they were able to capture. I wouldn't say that the film was brimming with those incredible moments. Of course, no spoilers, the ending scene, his sort of emotional reaction when he finally goes back to that place when he's killed and he's almost vomiting there, and those moments and sticking with those long things. And when he's on the dock and he's talking about karma, and he asks him, like, what does karma mean to you? And he starts talking about the gods, and we stay on this wide shot and this lightning strike in the background right as he's talking about a sort of a cosmic or a greater being, sort of, or this being a truth of nature. And it just, the context and the setting of that was just so perfect. But I would say that the whole film was, I can't believe that they captured this stuff. I mean, it's a one of the 100 million story. That being said, I wouldn't say the film was brimming with moments where it was like, the stars just aligned here, in terms of the footage that they got at the end of the day.
All right. I'll go next if you don't mind, Jose.
Yeah.
So I think I have to give it a 5. So this is my first 5 for this movie, just because, like, I kind of agree with you that, like, the whole movie isn't packed with, like, these crazy moments, but they have a few that are so impactful that, like, they make the movie. So, and like, he really, like, Congo just opened up his soul to this filmmaker, and he just, like, laid it all bare. And that's something that is kind of amazingly rare in documentary, that you get someone just being so brutally honest all the time. And he just had no reservation. And, the moment where he's in the chair in the, like, detective room and he gets choked and then he's like, stop. Like, that's the most real thing I've ever seen in my life on film.
So incredible. I mean, that moment where he's experiencing completely 100% empathy with the people that he tortured, and he can't really deal with that emotion only until the end of the film, which is another moment that is just amazing. They captured
that follow-up moment is also
when they shoot Anwar watching the scenes at the end, and he says, "Did they feel this way?" And Josh, the filmmaker, points out, he's like, "Actually, they felt worse because they knew they were going to die, and this was just a movie." I mean, what an incredible emotional event to capture. That emotional moment could have happened in a lot of other contexts, and we got to see it front and center in a medium shot. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, so because of those kind of moments, I think another great moment was when they were at the TV studio, and then, they're doing their promotion, gangster means free men, or it's like Premen is, I guess, the actual word that they use. And then it cuts to backstage, and the people behind the cameras are like, what that must do to you. Like, you get to, it's one of the few moments in the film that we get, like, a real reaction from a person from an outsider.
Perspective.
And that was a really great moment. I'm glad they threw it in the film. So just like for the power of some of these films, I have to list one last one on the list is they do the big fire scene where they're like burning the village down, right? And then afterward, when they call cut, like these people went through the trauma of that scenario. Like they weren't.
Some of them
acting.
may have even been alive when that happened as young people.
And like there were a couple of things that struck me about this in really opposite directions. Like on one hand, you see a lot of humanity in this scene because they're like overheating. There's the woman who's overheating, and everybody's there like really trying to take care of her. And like these are killers who murdered women and children like it was nothing, and here they are taking care of someone. But like right alongside that is the fact that like the guy put his daughter in the film. And he's like, you did a good job, you know, tears are just for on camera. You hear him talking to his daughter down, trying to calm her down. But I'm like, you exposed her like a 7-year-old, maybe 8, like she couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, a 7 or 8-year-old girl to the horrors of what you did to other people. Like he's revealed the monster that he was.
Anwar did the same thing when he invited his grandchildren in to watch that reenactment scene.
Yeah, and like, I just, like, I can't wrap my head around why you would do that. Like to me it's so cruel.
That's I mean that's the beauty.
Give us your thoughts, Jose. I want to.
That is what I think is beautiful about, because it's and I have two things to say about this. You cannot conceive it. For them, the reality is so different that he could take pride about taking his kid to show him what he did, because he was against the communists. He was against evil. You know, imagine if you were brought up in like an overly Christian family, and then suddenly you acknowledge another family as pawns of the devil, and then you go and kill them. Wouldn't you feel that this is something that you should be proud of? Like it's extreme violence and everything. Like this is how different a person can get to think from the perspective that you cannot even fathom the
family
idea.
Through it to put them in the victim's place.
Well, they are self-acknowledged sadists.
I mean, yes.
I guess that's true.
But that's the thing. That's the point. Is like to him, there's nothing wrong about it. Like he doesn't even understand the damage that he did. So he's putting her there because he hasn't been in that position ever. So he doesn't feel it's that problematic. But one of the things, and I'm giving it a 5 on these, by the way.
Footage.
What I think that is brilliant, and even when I feel that what you said, Ben, is true, but also like we don't know all the other things that they kept aside. So then when they were building the story, they found this shot and they go like, oh, this shot is exactly what it shot means, and then they probably built the story with the best shot that they had. That doesn't take away the fact that they didn't have it, but they couldn't have ever planned something like this. They just went through hundreds of hours that we haven't seen, and then chose the one that tells.
Yeah, but I mean that is documentary film.
No, that's right? Editing. That's editing. I mean, this movie has 5 on editing for me if we were measuring that.
But we're measuring like, you know, the quality of the footage throughout the film. Like, how did you feel about it?
Yeah.
And like cinematography included. I do think it was well shot throughout.
It really was. I had a great directorial eye, as well as, I mean, some of the towards the end of the film, there's a static shot at night. It's just beautifully composed, beautifully just taking advantage of the natural light in the area. And, you know, you guys are swaying me really to a 5. Let's not forget that Werner Herzog was an executive producer on this film, and you can see why they had some creative synergy of him to be wanting to help get this at least through distribution. Because if you think about it, you know, my reason for 4 was like, hey, it doesn't have those moments, but 5, the overall film. I mean, that guy to go there to be talking to those people. I mean, that guy, I'm going to give him a 5 plus some serious cojones, because I mean, like, just going out there, like being around that, you don't know when people are going to decide that we're serious and we're not serious. I mean, these people are obviously unhinged, and so for that filmmaker to be so bold to capture these things and this story, I mean, as far as the goods go, I'm going to go with the 5 now. Yeah.
I mean, and to talk to them, to tell him like they actually felt worth, because like to have that level of, you know, like trust.
So let's segue right into artistry, Jose, if you want to take us off.
No, I just want to say one more thing about this before I forget it.
About the footage? Or
well, it's in a general sense about the movie, but
so we're going into artistry, so I feel like that's kind of really what you're getting into, anyway.
Okay, well, almost, because this is extremely political, but one of the things that I love about this film is that it allows me to explain myself on something that I have been saying, like, you know, like to other people. It's like we've been trained by the society in which we live. We've been brainwashed to believe certain code of values. These people have been brainwashed to believe another code of values. And within the code of value that we have been brainwashed to believe is the fact is of thinking that every unethical decision humankind can take, it is not without a flaw. It is, by all intents and purposes, the wrong thing to do, and it won't work. And then genocide, for example, is like, oh, genocide can never be the answer because it doesn't work. And then this movie proves to me that genocide works when it's allowed to happen to the fullest. These people eradicate.
Well, what do you mean it worked? I mean, like they were able to carry out the genocide? Is that what you mean? It worked?
They were able to do what the genocide was intended to do, which meant to eliminate communism for the country, for example. And then every other
people, then.
Exactly. No, but every time that I bring this topic up to anybody, go like, it will never work. It works. It just has always been stopped.
You mean you say it's not possible? Is that what you mean?
What I was saying is that regardless.
Yeah. Are you condoning genocide, Jose?
I am not condoning genocide.
Because that's kind of
genocide.
Because that's kind of what it sounds like.
No.
I mean, Ben's trying to help you out here.
No.
I mean, because genocides have happened. I mean, in other scenarios, in like say the last 30 years, there have been genocides acknowledged by the international community. But what was the amazing, to your point, the amazing lesson for me here was that they created a society which was they just had empty souls. You know, the people essentially the economy is run on politics. Like people are paid to show up to rallies, and then people get elected so that they can extort. I mean, everybody's just extorting everybody else. I mean, it's amazing anyone can feed themselves in this country. It seems like this whole country is running, the economy runs off an election process.
Yeah.
No,
where the governors buy votes directly from the people. They literally pay them.
It talks about murder in a camera. It's like, oh, I could just stab you, and then they all laugh. It's like, can you imagine if somebody here in the States said that? Like,
but you're right though. The fact that these people are still there sipping Coronas and smoking cigarettes, and the international community is not extraditing, prosecute. I mean, what can be done? You know, he's right. They got they got away with it.
The Chinese that are left there are they're not even second citizens. They're just being extorted. There's extreme racism there because of this whole thing. Like, the repercussions of the genocide are messy. The government's still very afraid that people are going to uprise and want revenge. They're very aware of the concept of revenge. And it's like, and they're afraid of each other. I think one of the best examples of, it's kind of a two-part, but like of them being afraid of each other is like, the old general comes onto the set and he tells them, he goes, this is bad for our image. Because it shows that we were the cruel ones.
Yeah.
And like,
it was
we
an
don't
incredibly self-aware moment in the film.
Yeah, it was scary. That like made him the most scary person in the room to me, because I was just like, he's so aware.
That was a key moment in the film because it started open the Pandora's box that the film had to offer, which is this introspection and self-examination. After that, that was one of a few very important scenes in the film where they started to ask themselves with some amazing clarity, like, what does it mean that I did this? And going through, of course, as the conceit of the film, producing a film to exercise those emotions within themselves, to find some way to deal with it. And then, of course, there was the character who was essentially deal with it by ignoring it and through commercialism and just living a happy life and just saying it didn't matter.
Yeah, or like the guy who, I didn't even know what was going on. And they're like, how could you not have known? How could you not have known? The guy just calls him on his...
Exactly.
He's trying not to be culpable. It's his way of coping with the horror of what happened around him. And the fact that he let it pass, right?
That's what makes Anwar our anti-hero. Because he's terrible, obviously, right?
Yeah,
but you
he's killed
kind of find him
people.
charismatic in a way because he's a filmmaker trying to make his movie, trying to put his vision. A lot of people can relate to that, especially documentary folks that are interested in filmmaking. He's the only character that comes closest. It's like someone that's a total denier, someone completely subjugates their emotional viewpoint in commercialism, someone that acknowledges it but says, like, hey, what can you do about it? And then he is actually trying to emotionally wrestle with this.
He shows signs of regret. He shows signs of wanting empathy with his victims.
And that makes him a beautiful anti-hero in a crazy way. I mean, I'm in no way condoning or anything, but if you just look at it as a narrative,
it makes you feel that like in another scenario, in another life, he would have been a wonderful guy and a family man, and like, you know, he was in the situation where he was poor and he fell into like this gangster idea early to make money, and then they were contracted to take out communists, and like, you know, he just like fell into that, and like he's so practical about the way that he goes about the murder. It's like really it was a job for him. He's like, oh, we had to deal with the blood, and just like, and there is this distance that he has from it, and you can tell that it's been eating at him for his entire life. It's a great
point that you bring up. You know, this is the way he made money, and you have to, you know, your brain, you gotta think of yourself as a little bit of not a crazy person, right? Because like.
Absolutely, you have to justify your own actions if you're not going to.
He brought it up so many times how proud he was that he came up with an efficient way to kill people. He brought it up as a point, you know, if it's his job, it was kind of a claim to fame in a way in their weird history of himself.
I did a good job. It was kind of how he saw it. And then like he only was like late in life deciding to exercise empathy. Like none of these guys have any sense of empathy for the most part except Congo. And I think that like him as an anchor to the film is a testament to the artistry of this film. The fact that we can feel any empathy at all for a man who has killed guaranteed hundreds of people.
Virtually.
You know, like, I don't feel sympathy for him, you know, and I want him to go through it. I think he deserves it. And like the fact that he knows he deserves it creates empathy from us, the audience, towards him, I think. So if we're going to go score, I think kind of for all those reasons, I got to give it a 5. Like this is another area where like art meets nonfiction in a way that's, you know, he found an incredible series of stories to tell throughout this like ridiculous series of events of them filming and recreating their past.
Well, it helps also when your main character looks like Nelson Mandela, like it's so much.
He does kind of, yeah. He's
a little bit.
Like, yeah, he's a very shitty Nelson Mandela.
Yes, he's like the opposite
don't
of
compare
Nelson
him
Mandela.
to Nelson Mandela.
I mean, he physically has like the same kind of hair, like the eyes squint in a certain way. Like
He's
I don't
thinner.
know.
No, but I think what you're speaking to is, you know, he's somebody's grandpa at the end of the day.
Grandpa.
You know, and you feel parts of that in the film, and then you realize, holy crap, this is not somebody's grandpa, and maybe he could.
I mean, he is though. He is a grandfather.
Well, I mean, you know,
and like
not necessarily, but not a nice guy.
Can you even imagine that being your grandfather, a child, innocent? You've never killed anybody. Like by the time you learn what that means, to know, like, I mean, I guess they've already, like you said, they've been so brainwashed into having pride over it that, you know, his children probably won't have any kind of.
Who knows? I mean, at least until they grow up and understand what actually that means, because this is all kids. They have no idea what this means. It's interesting that you two, Ben, you actually didn't actually mention it the way that John mentioned it, but it's like you feel like incredible empathy towards what happened over there, and also you refuse to in principle, to just attach yourself to this character. I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking facts, but I'm not feeling any kind of empathy, neither against him nor towards what he did.
It's very difficult, I think, because he is emotionally constipated, and you spend a lot of time of the film trying to decide, what am I supposed to feel from this person? Because also you're discovering who this person truly is through the film. So it takes a while for that to happen. I think that empathy is the name of the game when it comes to this picture. And it's kind of, I don't want to run away with the hosting duties, but it's a great transition into relevance for me because.
Well, do you have a score for artistry?
I'm gonna go with a 5 for artistry.
What about you, Jose?
I'm gonna give it a 5.
All
I think like for everything that you said.
Yeah, I mean, all right. So go ahead into relevance.
Well, I mean, the film empathy was a huge mess into the film, and at first I was like, first of all, I give it a 4 for relevance. And I think that this film has a glass ceiling on it for relevance because it's not specifically about a topic that's in the headlines. It's not about the political system. It's not a food documentary. It's not a hip topic. That being said, the themes I think are hugely relevant right now, especially if you can look around the world, but you can look specifically in the United States of America. We have a lot of conflicts, a lot of social justice issues, a lot of government issues, and I think that they ultimately stem from a lack of empathy. You could look at the conflict between Blue Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. You could look at the division between the right and the left, between progressives and more conservative folks, people who are supporting Trump or what have you. And the bottom line is you see conflict when you don't have empathy. And when you can have empathy for another group, you can come together, you can solve problems. So I think what you see here is ultimately a culture that is not acknowledging their need for empathy. So you create, as one character says, we've lost our souls. It's a country with people with empty souls. One of the killers says. So I think that even though this, on the face of it, has nothing to do with America. America is all over it. They talk about American filmmaking, American culture.
I was going to say, I think
gangsters.
that there is a relevance to the States in our culpability, and the fact that we condoned this particular genocide because it was anti-communist. And we don't, I don't think they acknowledge it as genocide, but that's pretty much what it is. And just blanket persecution. And not only did we condone it, but we influenced the manner in which they executed it. This is the ultimate ad for people who are anti-violence in films. It's like they took lessons from The Godfather, a film that we love and revere here in the States. We love it. It's like one of the all-time greatest films, yada, yada, yada. And yet this film influenced the murder of hundreds of actual people. And would they have died anyway without these films? Probably.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's affected their culture so much and their ability to write it off, and the fact that our position in the world as this crazy world power, and the fact that we condone it gives it credibility and gives these gangsters credibility. And America has kind of a long history of supporting dictators in the name of fighting communism and just terrible, terrible people. And I think this just kind of is another reminder of its lasting effect. The fact that these people are still in power. You know what I mean? Where I think the film kind of struggles with relevance is its inability to offer any sort of hope or answers to these problems. It's literally just a character study. And I think that you brought up that when they started the film, they were going to the victims. And I feel like they lost sight of the victims in this film at a certain point. It becomes so much about the psychology of sociopathy and sadism and cronyism that we lose sight of any hope of getting out of this. It just seems we're stuck in this forever. It really, even though Congo has this cathartic moment, he's not in a position to affect change anymore. He's the only one we see go through any sort of regret or empathy with his victims. And, they love him and adore him, but he's not going to change anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think another important issue when it comes to relevance is they deal in the film with the way the press fit into the political machinations of how this was able to happen. I mean, essentially the press was
enabled it all, yeah.
It enabled it all. They were writing backwards. They were saying, oh, well, this is a person that we want to get, so we're going to print bad stuff about them to justify what we're about to do them or rewrite the stuff. And I think that the fact that they showed that the press and journalists and journalism were such an important, powerful factor into the needle going from one way to the other, I think it's very relevant now for the way we treat the media and the way we treat facts and the way we treat journalists and the way we make a distinction between journalists, but entertainment bloggers or people that just analyze, or political commentators, and those are separate from journalists, and they don't have to have the ideals. I mean, what's the difference? You're either a journalist or a propagandist, and they forfeited their platitudes and their ideals as journalists when they became propagandists and just aided in the killing machine. And I think it's a huge reminder how relevant, how important a free and open press that is not controlled or corrupt or dictated by the military or has those kind of interests, how important that can be.
I like that takeaway.
People.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily get that myself, but I like it. It's a good takeaway from the film. There's a lot to mine here, for sure. What do you think, Jose, on the topic of relevance? It's a very personal category in terms of.
I'll give it a 5. I'll give it a 5 because I feel that it's important. I don't feel I see it. I see what Ben just said blew my mind. Like, it's true. It's just like, it's like I didn't see it that way, but it's like the military on this system just getting into every position in order to broadcast an idea, and that's brilliant.
But seeing these paramilitary groups is really scary when you think about how many paramilitary groups the States produces. These
paramilitary groups, very similar paramilitary groups, are forming or already formed where I come from. I just haven't been able to see them because I've been here for 8 years, but this is happening down there, and it could get that. Like, I think that this movie proves the fact that things can get that worse if you don't pay attention. It's like these ideologies are not stupid. Like, this to me is the beautiful fact of this. We have been trained to dismiss it because we call it stupid.
Illogical. I can't. How could it happen?
Exactly. To me, it's like racism. It's because to me, and a stupid idea.
It seems inconceivable when you're safe.
A stupid idea is an idea that in which you try to do something. You try to achieve something by means that make no sense. Saying, for example, I'm going to make this country better, so I'm going to take all the people that are not from this genome, or the other people that are from this color. That makes no sense. People from these groups could make the world better. But and then we go, racism is stupid. Then you say genocide, and people go, another stupid idea. No, killing everybody that doesn't agree with you will actually give you the full power. It's not a stupid idea. It's an immoral and unethical idea, but it will work if you allow it to happen.
But to say that it does, like, here's where the flaw is, though, in that argument, is that it's short-sighted. You know what I mean? It's a quick solution to your problem because
I know, but that doesn't make it stupid.
It's also a short-sighted goal, though.
It's a short-sighted goal.
Control and power,
but they're also living in fear. And, like, they do know that there are people out there who want them dead. Like, and they have to front all the time for the rest of their life, or else it's going to come back to bite them. And they're afraid of each other. One of the scenes in the film where there's the paramilitary, they're doing it's before they burn the village, and everybody's, like, cheering, and there's the one officer who's like, this made me really uncomfortable.
He's the guy from the state, yeah. Mm-hmm.
In the next scene, they cut to him going, okay, you know what? It represents our feelings, and great, we can go with it. You know why? Because he's surrounded by killers. Like that, if that's the goal, to live in fear of one another, or to live in fear of your neighbor, then yeah, you succeeded. But like, you know, like, it's dystopic.
No,
it's completely dystopic. And even for someone like Congo, who is the victor, he represents someone who is a hero to his people.
He got the best out of the scenario.
He came out
until
on
I don't know
top
who
of
knows
the mountain,
what's going to happen now.
And he lives with nightmares.
Look.
He can't sleep. He can't sleep any night of his life without seeing the eyes of a beheaded person on the roadside that he killed. Like, so if you're saying that works, I think that is an extremely flawed argument.
No. Like, if you're gonna come to the argument and change the objective of the argument to one that would make no sense, then that would be okay. Because the Spanish came to America, eradicated all the Aztecs, and then they conquered the freaking continent. Then the English came to North America, they killed all the Native Americans, or they decimated at the point, and they conquered. So genocide did work for them because the objective was to conquer. You're talking about being happy. That genocide was not about being happy. It was about eradicating communism out of the country. The repercussion of genocide might be immoral and unhappy, but that was not the objective. The objective was met by the use of genocide. So it is not a stupid idea, and we need to be careful of it because somebody's going to come back and say, this worked before, it can work again. And because we acknowledge it's just a stupid idea, we don't pay attention to it. That's what I'm saying.
I don't think that's true. I think that we do pay attention to it.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate and just say that I'm grateful for this perspective because I think that, John, your perspective is one that far too many Americans have, and I think that your perspective is one that is one that a lot of countries in the world have seen and have been through it, but we're a little insulated in the States. And I think it's an important lesson, no matter what. And I think that's a good thing to keep watching films like this, so that we are reminded of it, so we preserve the scenario that we do have here in the States.
I think we need to be extremely vigilant, and I think that the long-term effects of it undermine the goals. So, like in the States, colonial whites came through, and they took over, and they massacred Native Americans, and they brought enslaved populations, and like the ripples of those repercussions threaten to tear down our society today.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, we're not safe, and you can see, like, we're still grappling with those conflicts. They didn't go away. Like, it didn't work because there's too many damn people, and you can't get rid of all of them. Somebody always survives, and it creates contention. You know what I mean? Like, we're trying to be idealistic. Some of us in the States are trying to be idealistic and live in a melting pot, a Star Trek-like future where like all the races get along, right? But these genocides that you're talking about undermine that prosperity and have perhaps delayed it for thousands of years. So to say that it's effective, I just like I'll fight it to my death.
Well, because
I don't think it's effective, and like there is some short-term game.
To the film's credit, it seems like the Indonesian government is doing a really good job of making it seem like it is a great solution. Everything worked out. You have a prosperous country now. You have an authoritarian, military-driven government. They control the economy. The economy is good. People have money. People do things. There's entertainment. Blah blah blah. But the film did a really good job of finding those moments, not only bringing them out in the editing and the way they shot them, but actually like just capturing the moments. Like, for example, when Anwar Congo and his friends are fishing on the little tiny dock, and they talk about seeing a neurologist, seeing a psychiatrist. That's when you start to have those revelations that, wow, there's huge underlying issues and problems that will be generational. When they're talking about, revenge and, hey, maybe it would be healthy to apologize. He's like, well, then I have to admit I was wrong, and how can I deal with that? So I think that it's very true. It does not work, and the film does a good job of showing those instances of how the awful truth underneath of it is the reality.
Yeah. I mean, I do like how
it is relevant. I think
that comes out to I'll give it a 5 for relevance.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at
just based on this conversation, are you gonna stick with 4, Ben?
I'm gonna stick with 4, considering the viewing audience in general. If I wanted to see a really relevant film, I would really expect to see it kind of be ripped from the headlines and be kind of hip on information. But I think that this is a really important film for people to see in general, and certainly for people to see in the context of what's going on with the upcoming election, or just how we view and treat each other, and to not take that for granted, because it can end up in an extreme scenario that there is no way out of. So I think if we just learn to listen and love and do that through filmmaking, then I think I'd stick it.
Yeah, I think that's
it's all it takes is one step at a time before you know it's like, wow, how do we get here?
Yeah.
In Trump.
All right, so this film did considerably better than our first scored film. So we averaged out, like we said, we had a ghost contributor who was the average of our scores, and since we never had like crazy wide variant scores, it was pretty easy. So it came out to 83.
That's not bad.
83 out of 100.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in the system here, that's pretty impressive. I have to say, I walk away feeling like it's a really good film. I really enjoy, as I said earlier in the podcast, when you watch a documentary, and they don't all have to be this way. There's riches to lots of documentaries, but when you watch a documentary, you feel like, wow, I feel like I'm watching a movie. I can't believe this is real. From the presentation, from a cinematic perspective, to the shots that they were able to get, and the way they were portraying things live as they were happening, and being bold and making choices about what they should focus on in the action to give you a cinematic perspective of something else. Really impressive.
I mean, I would recommend this movie to pretty much anyone, probably over 16, to see.
Yes. Yes. There needs to be an age.
It doesn't get extremely violent, but the themes are
extremely mature.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of scenes that are really harsh, and I wouldn't want to like show someone too young. Like just some of the things they say are just like so despicable.
Is it? It's rated, right?
It's not rated.
I imagine maybe it's like a PG-13 rating.
It's not rated.
It's not rated.
Yeah, it's just not rated.
Yeah,
it's unrated.
It's like everybody should know.
So, but yeah, I would recommend this to like
put it at a children's party.
Everybody. It's something that like if you're not from that part of the world, like you should be aware that like people live like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think it's a wonderful film. Thank you so much, Ben, for joining us.
Thank you.
Pleasure's mine, guys. Thank you for inviting me on, and thank you for turning me on to a great documentary that I've been meaning to see for a while.
Yeah, this was a good one. I'm really glad we got to this one. Where can they find you? Out on the interwebs.
If you want to check out my stuff, you can go to benjaminlawrencemyers.com. I'm an actor and a filmmaker. You can see what's current projects and whatnot. And keep your eye out for The Vanity, making the festival circuit this fall. It's a kind of a horror thriller. Really excited about that. You can check that out at Shakedown Productions and hashtag The Vanity. Hashtag Sanity is only skin deep. And thanks again for having me on and having a fun chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Jose, where can the people find you?
You can find me at JVCH2 on Instagram and Jose in Paradox on Twitter.
Yeah, and you can find me at John in Paradox. That's Jon in Paradox at Twitter and Instagram. Yeah. I'll try to be better about posting more. All right, that's our show. A great movie. We haven't decided the next one. You can find it Wednesday. We'll have it up by then on the Facebook site. I guess I should tell them about the Facebook site. Join the Movie Club Collective on Facebook. It's facebook.com/Movie Club Collective. I post there twice a week. Tuesdays the show goes up. Wednesdays the announcement for the next week's episode goes up. So that you have some time to watch it before you listen, because of course we spoil everything. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Take care, guys.
This has been a J Squared production.